Once upon a time, there lived a very careless woman whose carelessness almost ruined the life of her innocent daughter. Imagine a mother being so careless that she forgot her newborn baby in the public toilet whilst having a conversation on the phone. It was only when she arrived home over an hour later that she realized that she had gone home without her baby. Luckily, a kind woman found the baby wailing alone on the cold bathroom floor and stayed with her until a Barry arrived breathless and crying, claiming it was a small mistake. This is the story of a Barry, the woman who lived like the world would fix her mistakes. I was once married to a man who abandoned her with her pregnancy and relocated out of the country to start a new life. Stuck and frustrated, Iber decided to get rid of the pregnancy. But all that she did failed, leaving her to carry the baby to full term. Aber gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. Whilst others jubilated, she wept, knowing how unready she was to have a child. As she sat there weeping, she heard her name from a distance. A familiar voice called out her name repeatedly, and I was so stunned to see her childhood friend and classmate, Uzi-Osama, had just given birth in the next ward, and she was so excited to see Aber after a very long time. They spent time together, gushing over their newborn babies who were born minutes apart, as if fate had planned their reunion down to the last detail. They got talking, and Ibiri got to find out that was now happily married to a wealthy politician. She lived in the choicest area of Lagos, and I could not hold back her joy. Uziyama, on hearing all that had happened to Eri, decided to take care of her. She paid her hospital bills and even offered to set up a business for her. That was how Abr's life transformed. Her friend Uma rented a small apartment for her, stocked it up with baby supplies, and opened a hair salon in Abr's name. But despite all the help, Aberi remained as reckless as ever. She would leave her baby alone in the salon without telling anyone as customers walked in to meet her crying baby. How can a mother leave her baby alone in a salon? They asked themselves as they looked around in disbelief, searching for the salon owner. Some would pick up the wailing child and wait. Others stormed out in anger, vowing never to return. Still, I saw nothing wrong with what she was doing. One day, Osuma decided to pay her a visit at the salon. She arrived at the salon and met Iber asleep on the sofa whilst her baby was choking on her vomit. Her entire body was soiled with feces as flies buzzed around her like trash. Oyama stood frozen in the doorway, her hand covering her mouth in shock. The sight was too much to process. Abiri, oblivious to the chaos around her, was still snoring lightly on the sofa. The baby, her tiny daughter, lay on the floor struggling to breathe as the vomit covered her face and body. For a moment, Ozuma felt the world spin around her. How could this be happening? How could Abiri, her friend, let this happen to her own flesh and blood? Without hesitation, Ozama rushed forward, scooping the baby up in her arms as her heart raced. She cleaned up the baby and angrily woke Abiri, who staggered up from the sofa drunk. Ozama could not believe her eyes. Abiri had been drinking, not caring about her baby. What if she choked and died? She asked the berry, who stared at her blankly and replied that the baby was perfectly fine. I don't know what the force is all about, she said to Oyama, whose eyes were now filled with tears. Ozama sat there sad as she held the baby in her arms, her heart breaking to see how this baby was being treated by her own mother. Ozama remembered her own daughter at home, who was born on the same day as I knew how protective she was of her daughter, and was so heartbroken to see I cold and indifferent about her own. Months passed and kept a close eye on them. She visited their home daily to check up on the child, who ended up growing into an extremely beautiful young woman. Her mother's neglect for her grew into full-blown hatred, and Anodi could not understand what she had ever done wrong to her mother. She stood there and watched as her mother belittled her in the worst way possible. She called her a curse, a mistake, and a disgrace. The bird constantly reminded Anazi that she was never supposed to be born. She called her so many names, and Anazi began to feel like the genesis of her mother's problems. She cried herself to sleep on so many nights and did everything within her power to please her mother. However, nothing she did worked as her mother's hatred for her increased with each passing day. Whenever her daughter Daisy visited, a berry would force a smile and act happy. "If you ever say anything to her, I will skin you alive," a berry warned sternly as she smiled through the pain. She laughed when her heart was heavy and even watched her mother compare her continuously with Oyama's daughter Daisy. A berry would yell, "See how intelligent she is. Look at how clean she is, you pig. Even if I bathe you with perfume, you'll still smell like refuge," she said to Anazi, whose heart shattered to see her mother treat her in such a way. On her birthday, Anazi sat back and watched as her mother gifted Oyama's daughter a box of cupcakes whilst pretending that she did not exist. Watched as her mother gushed over Daisy, hugging and praising her for being so perfect. She stood there quietly, her heart sinking as she watched her mother celebrate someone else on her own birthday. She didn't even get a happy birthday, not a glance, not a smile, nothing. Later that night, Anazi returned home and sat on her bed broken as tears poured down her eyes. She summoned the courage to approach her mother, reminding her that today was also her birthday. But her mother looked her dead in the eye and asked if she truly deserved to be celebrated. "You think someone like you deserves a birthday? You should be thanking me every day for not throwing you away when I had the chance." Trembled as she replied, "I didn't ask to be born, Mama. That was all it took." I slapped her so hard that she fell to the floor. "Ungrateful child. You're nothing but a burden. Nothing good ever came out of you." Goatse clutched her cheek, the pain stinging both her face and her soul. She didn't cry anymore. She was tired of crying. Instead, she stood and slowly walked away, her small frame heavy with sadness. From that night, something began to harden. She focused on her education, doing everything possible to make something out of her life. One morning, whilst Anazi was in school, she heard of a new scholarship opening that would send the top students abroad on a full academic scholarship. Hearts lit up with joy. She knew this could be her only escape, a way to finally break free from the pain and humiliation that she had constantly faced at home. She threw herself into her studies like never before, stayed up late, read every book she could find, and even borrowed textbooks from other students. She studied during breaks, ate lunch alone, and blocked out every form of distraction. Weeks passed, and Anazi secretly sat for the scholarship examination. She was so hopeful that she'd get the scholarship, so she prayed whilst hoping and enduring all the things that her mother did to her. That week, her mother informed her that a young man had come for her hand in marriage. She informed Anazi that she was going to marry the young man whether she liked it or not. Anazi stood there frozen, unable to speak. "I'm only 17, Mama," she finally said to her mother, who told her that the decision was final. "Do you think that there's anything else left for a girl like you, you useless child? If you ever thought that your life will ever amount to anything, then you are delusional." She pleaded with her mother not to do this to her, but Aberi did not listen. She went ahead with the marriage plans, not caring that the man in question was 30 years older than her daughter. Anazi stood there and watched as her world crumbled before her eyes. She couldn't understand why her mother would do such a thing to her, especially knowing she was still in school. Days later, a quiet miracle happened. The scholarship results were released, and Anazi, despite the chaos at home, came first, not just in her school, but in the entire district. Her name was on the board, her face on the school website, and the news quickly spread like wildfire. Second place went to none other than Daisy, Oyama's daughter. The scholarship committee made it clear that only the top students would receive the full award, including tuition, accommodation, and travel expenses abroad. When Oyama heard the news, she was filled with joy. She remembered how hard-working Anazi had been and decided to surprise her with a visit to congratulate her and her mother. She arrived at Aberi's house with gifts, her heart warm with pride, as she congratulated Aberi for having such a brilliant child. "Goatse has made us all proud," she said with a big smile on her face. "Imagine. First position in the entire district. Aberi, God has remembered your daughter. But Aberi's face twisted with rage. She didn't say thank you. She didn't even look pleased. Instead, she rose to her feet and stormed into Anazi's room. Who told you to apply for any scholarship, eh? Who gave you permission to disgrace me like this? Anazi's heart sank. Mommy, I didn't mean to disgrace you, she whispered. I just wanted a chance. A chance to be free. Aberi turned and walked back into the living room, where Oyama still stood smiling, unaware of what was brewing. Then, in a shocking moment, Aberi picked up her phone, dialed the scholarship office in front of Oyama, and said in a cold, clear voice, "Good afternoon. My name is Aberi Chikuma. My daughter will no longer be accepting the scholarship offer. We are not interested. Please give it to the next student." Before they could ask a question, she ended the call. The room fell silent. Oyama stood there, speechless, as Anazi, who had come out of her room, stood frozen at the doorway, her legs shaking. Then, as the weight of what had just happened hit her, she dropped to her knees and let out a deep, broken cry. Her dreams, years of hard work, were gone in 1 minute. She sobbed like her soul was collapsing. Oyama turned, stunned. Aberi, what have you done? Why would you do that to your own daughter? But Aberi folded her arms and said, "Let Daisy take the scholarship. She's better. Goatsi doesn't deserve anything good. She should marry the man I picked for her and stop chasing nonsense." Minutes later, the school called Oyama. They confirmed that Daisy had been moved up and awarded the scholarship. Oyama broke down in tears on the phone. She turned to Aberi and asked the question that had haunted her for over 17 years, "Iber, why did you swap our babies on that fateful night?" Aberi opened her mouth in shock and began to stutter. She never knew that her friend Oyama had caught her swapping the babies that night in the hospital. What had happened was that Aberi had always been bitter toward Oyama. Back in secondary school, Oyama had everything Aberi ever wanted: beauty, intelligence, admiration, and the love of the boy Aberi once dreamt of marrying. Life seemed to always favor Oyama, and Aberi could never stomach it. So, when she found out that they both gave birth in the same hospital on the same day, a dark idea took root in her mind. In the middle of the night, Aberi crept into the nursery and swapped the babies. She then returned to her bed like nothing had happened, smiling to herself, thinking she was about to exact revenge on the woman she so despised. But what Aberi did not know was that Oyama had woken up briefly that night to breastfeed and noticed Aberi moving strangely. Curious, she followed her silently and stood at the door, watching in horror as her friend gently lifted her baby from the cot and swapped her with her own baby. Oyama said nothing. She quietly hid in the corner and, once Aberi had returned to her room, swapped the babies back. Oyama kept this to herself for all these years. She returned home with her true daughter, Daisy, and quietly raised her with love, while Aberi went home thinking that the child she took home was Oyama's child. Aberi treated the child with negligence, subjected her to years of abuse, hatred, and cruelty, convinced all along that she was punishing Oyama by mistreating her child. But what Aberi did not realize was that every slap, every insult, and every humiliation she hurled at Anazi was directed at her own biological daughter. Now, standing in the middle of her living room, with Oyama's words echoing in her ears, the truth dropped like thunder on Aberi's chest. "You're lying," she muttered, her voice breaking. "You're lying, Oyama." But Oyama wasn't. She pulled out an envelope from her bag, a DNA test she had conducted for a day like this. Adi was Oyama's daughter, while Anazi was the biological daughter of Aberi. Everywhere fell silent as Aberi's mouth hung open. She could not believe that she had been maltreating her own daughter for all these years. The revelation hit her like a ton of bricks. She turned to Goatsi and began to apologize. Not only had she hurt her daughter badly, but she had also given the scholarship meant for her daughter to Oyama's daughter. Daisy stood there frozen, tears trickling down her face as she stared at her mother in anger. She now understood why her mother hated her so much, and the thought made her chest tighten with a mixture of rage and grief. All these years, all the tears, all the begging, all because her mother thought she was someone else's child. Goatse took a slow, shaky step back. So you're saying that you hated me because you thought I was Oyama's daughter? Aberi, still on her knees, nodded, sobbing. I didn't know. I thought you were her child. I thought I was punishing her, not you. I didn't know. Please forgive me, my child. Please. Anazi's voice was calm, but it cut through the air like a blade. But you knew I was a child. A child who called you mommy. A child who begged for your love. And yet you still chose hatred. Aberi reached for her, but Anazi stepped back. Oyama, her voice shaking, spoke up. Anazi, you don't have to stay here anymore. You've suffered enough. Come home with me.